Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. We're up for a sports Emmy tonight, Tone. You think we'll win?
Tony Kornheiser, we better. I had to walk up 2 flights of stairs every day to do this show. Not only that, Mike, I started bribing people a while ago. I threw more 20s out my window than Gary McCord ever did. I'm trying to ensure that we win this thing.
Wow, 20s. You spread it around, huh?
20s.
That's the Chicago way. Yeah, I sort of learned that from my dad when I was a kid.
Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, the ruckus between Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher, a possible new home for the Washington football team, and the Tampa Bay Lightning sweep out the top seed. But we begin today with the Celtics crushing Miami last night in a total non-game. It was 18-1 at the beginning. The Heat missed their first 14 shots. Good luck if you went all the way with this one. Wilbon, you were there, so you had to.
Yeah.
Which team should feel better about its position as this series shrinks to best of 3?
Tony, there's only one answer to that, and it's based on health. That's what it's based on. I mean, last night the Celtics didn't have Marcus Smart, which could have been a disaster,
right,
but they got off to that lead that you mentioned, and they just held it because that's what this series is about. Who gets up by 30 and then sort of holds on the rest of the way. But if we look at the rest of this, so we talk about Marcus Smart not playing. Jimmy Butler may as well not have played. I mean, what did he have, 6 points in the game? He wasn't Jimmy Butler because he's out there on a bad knee. And I know because he's Jimmy Butler, a legit tough guy. He said after the game, it's not about the knee, I got to play better. Okay, but that's not the real deal, Tone. If the Miami Heat have to play with a very reduced Jimmy Butler tomorrow night in Miami in Game 5, they're not going to win. They're not going to beat Boston. Jimmy Butler's their most important player and, as far as I'm concerned, their best player. So if you ask me who's in a better position, it's going to be based on health. Tyler Hero, he wants to get back out there for Miami. The training staff may not let him. No Butler, no Sixth Man of the Year, Tyler Hero. What are we working with? Yeah. Kyle Lowry limping around with a bad hammy? It comes down to health.
So let me just take the overview here. Except for the Milwaukee-Boston series, which was a great series, all the other series lack drama at the end. It's disappointing. There are some statistics here that are actually meaningful. The last 15 games in the playoffs all across the league, the last 15, only 4 games have had a final margin of victory below 10 points. Only 1 has had a final margin of victory of 5 points. The average margin of victory is 20 points. So it's not dramatic at the end. In this series, Mike, there's only 4 lead changes.
Yeah.
There's only 4 lead changes.
Yeah.
So whoever gets out front, they win these games. And the other series has less drama than this one because that series is a foregone conclusion, the Golden State-Dallas series. If you ask me who's going to win, I will tell you that Miami has 2 games at home, but both teams, Boston and Miami, have already lost at home.
Yeah.
I have always thought Boston was a slightly better team, and I like Miami. Slightly better team because of Jason Tatum. There's a Tampa Bay Lightning stat that's really good. Boston's lost 5 games in the playoffs so far, came back and won the next one each time. And in those games, Jason Tatum is averaging 32.6 per game. So if we hadn't paid all the attention to Luka Doncic, deservedly so, but if we hadn't paid all that attention, somebody might be saying that Jason Tatum is the most important player in the series so far. And to get to your point about injuries, the entire starting 5 of the Miami Heat, their regular starting 5 was out there last night, Mike. They scored 18 points collectively. Yeah. That's unbelievably awful.
It is.
They shot 7 for 36. It's unbelievably awful. And I'll tell you this, that will not happen again. That will not happen.
That won't happen, and tomorrow night won't be a 30-point game. Because I don't know who is going to play effectively and be physically close enough to himself to matter tomorrow night in Miami for Game 5. But that ain't going to happen tomorrow night. And Tony, the most desperate team has just imposed itself at the beginning of these games, and the other team's been out of it. And it's a strange thing to watch in person. Tomorrow night, that will not happen. That's a dogfight tomorrow night. I don't know who's going to win it. I favor the Celtics. If Miami is just physically challenged like this, I do favor the Celtics, and I picked them to win this series in 6. We'll see. Let's move to the hard feelings between 2 former friends and colleagues. Are they former friends now? Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher. Last week, Saban alleged that Fisher and Texas A&M bought every player on their team through NIL deals, while Alabama was doing it the right way. Fisher called the comments despicable and called Saban a narcissist who thinks he's God. Ouch. Saban has apologized, saying he shouldn't have singled anyone out. Tone, which leader of young men is looking better in this back and forth?
Okay, so let's establish the fact. Neither of them looks good. So it's not that somebody looks better, it's that somebody looks less awful than the other one. And if I have to pick, it's basically a coin flip, and I'll say Saban because of that half-hearted apology. And because although he fired first, Jimbo Fisher came back with the fury of 10,000 suns.
Wow.
As you said, he called Saban his former boss. He called him a narcissist, said his comments were despicable. He also intimated that there was a lot of irregularities, in Saban's reign as a head coach in the past. Well, that's interesting because in the past, Jimbo Fisher worked for Saban. So if you know of some irregularity, get out there and say, here's what happened, and I will attest to it. But Saban doesn't look good. He's beefing down. That's no good. In fact, Mike, I think when he talks about Texas A&M paying players, he's just sending recruits to Texas A&M because it's legal to get paid now. So why wouldn't you go there? Part of me thinks that Saban is laying the groundwork, so if he loses again like he did last year to Fisher, he'll have an excuse. And by the way, that's October 8th. It's in Alabama. Circle a date.
Yeah, I don't. First of all, I'm not going to spend any time trying to figure out which side I'm taking. I'm just not. I was stunned when they had this beef, the initial beef, before we got to part two yesterday. But, Tony, let me say this. I talked to Nick Saban back in the late fall, I think it was, about NIL. And it's not Nick Saban's position is not disingenuous. Let me just say that. Because this was not publicized. I probably shouldn't even be talking about it publicly. We had a conversation because he was so concerned about it and what it means to a certain community of kids, a community I'm from. And he's concerned about, kids who don't have their hands out too and who may need this money and who can have an advantageous situation and a college experience is important. Nick Saban's position on this is not disingenuous. Now,
right.
How it got sideways, I don't know how it got sideways between the two of them. Saban is concerned about certain elements, and you can see the anger because he took it out on Fisher. But I don't know that when Fisher comes back and calls him a narcissist based on this, in this context, I don't know that that's fair. I'm not taking a side.
Mike,
I'm just watching it from afar and going, oh, my God.
I'm going to tell you this. I will bet the ranch on what I'm going to say now.
What?
That Nick Saban won't say this privately, but he will say this. He won't say this publicly, rather. He will say it privately to his inner circle. He will say this: we're not going to get beat by people buying players that we want. I don't care if Texas A&M is in the oil business. We're in the football business.
Yeah.
And we're going to make sure we get the players we want.
Yeah.
And by the way, did you see what Steve Spurrier said about Fisher? He said, just tell me what Saban said that was wrong.
Well, listen,
he hates him from Florida State.
Was going to lob, a bomb in there whenever he could get the chance. Wow.
It's Free Shoes University in the old days. Let's go local now for this story. There's a story today that the Washington football team has the right to buy a pile of land in Woodbridge, Virginia, on which to maybe build a new stadium. Woodbridge is 23 miles down I-95 from the capital of the United States of America. And a rule of thumb when you're driving down I-95 is this: add 2 hours to your trip. Wilbon, you once lived in Virginia.
Yeah.
Do you think it makes sense for the Washington team to move to Woodbridge, Virginia?
They're already in Virginia. Who cares whether it's Woodbridge or Ashburn Hills? They're already in Virginia. People outside of here, you said local. This is local for us.
They practice there.
That's
they don't
their
play
headquarters.
There.
They go there 7 days a week. They go to this other place 8 times a year.
I'm talking about game experience.
8
game experience. What I'm talking about.
A year. 8. The other 355 days a year, they're in Virginia already. They've been there since the early 1970s. 50 years. George Allen took them there. They're in Virginia. I know this because I lived in Virginia and I drove to that facility every day for a lot of years. So let's not act like they're relocating to the south from the north. They're going to the place that they live every day. What are we saying?
They have never had a stadium
Who cares
in
about the
Virginia. They've had a stadium in D.C.
That's the least of it.
So let me explain this, okay? Because when I moved here a long time ago, I didn't want to live in Virginia because of the traffic. And I'm going to tell you this. When you
there
go
was
south
no
on
traffic
I-95,
when you
when you
moved
go
here.
towards Fredericksburg, that is a slow death. All right? Fredericksburg is the end of motorized transportation in the United States of America. Every single time people go down to Woodbridge, Virginia, they'll be in traffic for hours and hours and hours.
Sunday.
I can leave my house in the District of Columbia.
Sunday.
I can go north past Baltimore and almost to Philadelphia by the time you can get to Woodbridge.
You know what's interesting?
Now, I know they have this in other cities. Santa Clara instead of
Yes,
San Francisco,
yes.
Arlington, Texas instead of Dallas,
such a hypocrite.
and Foxborough
You're a total hypocrite. Because you can
of Boston.
find your way to Robert Trent Jones to the golf course when you want to get there. Don't tell me that's the end
I
of the
can.
world.
That's
you didn't
66.
move there, Foghorn
That's
Leghorn, because it was the
66 to
South.
29.
That's why you
It's
didn't move there,
different.
not
That's
because of
not
the
it.
traffic. Stop it. There's no
What this
traffic
is
there on
about-
Sunday. None.
Yes, there is. What this is about is very simple. They should have gone back to RFK Stadium.
They're not
They
going
should
there.
do that now. They say they're going to tear down RFK. Go tear it down and build something else. This is another example of in the stewardship of Dan Snyder that it doesn't ever work
even-
out
you know
right.
what? You can blame Dan
communities
Snyder
may
for
want
a
this
lot of
team. They don't
stuff.
want the owner.
Not this, Tony. They've been in Virginia for 50 years. They want to get closer to Richmond. They were the team of the South. Before the Atlanta Falcons came along,
Before Atlanta.
the Redskins
Good luck.
had a network that was all about the South. The lyric in the
next
fight song
time
was "Fight
you're
for
driving
old
to Fredericksburg,
Dixie." Not fight for
Bring a
old DC.
refrigerator
Fight for old
food
Dixie.
so that when you get
no,
stuck
you don't wanna, you
for
don't even want
48 hours
you
in a
just wanna
snowstorm,
rant. You don't even want to
can
deal
eat.
with the
Let's
common
take a break.
sense of this.
I want to rant.
That's
you
ridiculous.
hate I-95. You shouldn't even have a vote
for
in this. Let's
old
take a break.
Dixie. How do you get that
Coming
lyric
up,
if you're not in Virginia?
Will Luka and
Please,
the Mavs
stop.
stave off elimination
Please.
tonight?
Team of the Confederate. That's what they were before the Falcons. Would it be wise to take the Lightning, the Ning, over every other team left in the Stanley Cup playoffs? It's a Virginia
Nobody
team.
calls
That's what
them
they
the
are.
name but you. It's time for toss-up. Two men enter, one man leaves, finishes the show, realizes his old friend Wilbon is finally back in town, thinks
here.
about going to see him, but instead decides to flip on a replay of the big USFL tilt
Yeah, I'm
between
sure.
the Maulers and the Breakers. So
Don't
what's
doubt that.
first?
Is that a thing?
Toss up. Who you got in tonight's game 4 in Dallas? The Warriors or the Mavericks?
So my instinct is to say Dallas because the Warriors know they can win this series. They don't care if they win tonight. And Luka Doncic was so great when the series left Phoenix and went back to Dallas that you think he can do it again. But this is 3-0. That was 2-0. This is different. And the last time they played a game, the Dallas players talked about their season as if it was already in their rearview mirror. They were talking about how well they did over the course of the season and what they had to do next season. You know, the Warriors, Mike, they're going to fly home to San Francisco, win or lose. Dallas should just stay home and sleep well because their year is over. I am picking the Warriors.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pick the Warriors as well, Tony, even though the Dubs will throw you a game. They just will. You know, they hear the sweet Georgia Brown music playing in their head, and they turn it over 24 times.
Right.
Yeah, they'll do that. They've done it in the finals. So they'll certainly do it in the conference finals. And you don't know. Dallas could get a game, and Dallas will behave, you know, badly, sort of stupidly on their bench and get another $100,000 fine, which I know they're objecting to, but which they deserve that fine, if not triple that. But I just think that the Warriors right now are proving something to themselves, and they may have 20 turnovers, but they'll still win. And Draymond and
They'll
Clay
win.
and Steph,
They'll win.
they understand what they're doing to get back to that perch. They'll win.
Next.
Toss up. Now who do you have to win the Stanley Cup? The Lightning or the Field?
So I don't know much about hockey, but I know Tampa Bay has won 2 Stanley Cups in a row. And I know they took out Toronto, and Toronto had a real good team this year, and they beat them twice in Toronto, including Game 7. And I know they just swept Florida. And Florida had more points than any team in the NHL this year. And the margin of victory in those 4 games was 13-3 in 4 games. In the last game, they shut them out. Florida hadn't been shut out all year. So I'm not really going to bet against Tampa Bay, a team that you can't ever beat 2 in a row. You cannot beat them 2 in a row. And let me get their goalie's name right. Andrei Vasilevsky had 49 saves the other night. Mike, in his last 7 series clinching games, he has 199 saves and 200 shots
He's
and
been
6
great.
shutouts.
He's
You
been
think
great.
I'm betting against him? Because I'm not.
I'll bet against him. And Avalanche are playing really well. Edmonton's playing really well. And how about Shesterkin? I mean, how about the Rangers? You're wandering a little bit off I-95. You're getting away from the Rangers. But, Tony, I think there are 3 viable alternatives. I think all 3 of those teams could challenge the Ning. They are playing great. And they wiped the floor with the Panthers. They did. Although you should be familiar with a number of times your team, the Capitals, led the league in points in the regular season and got wiped out in the first and second round. So that alone doesn't mean anything. I will still take the field, and I'm particularly looking at the Avalanche right now, particularly.
I'll take Tampa Bay, who is by the way, called the Bolts in town, not the Ning. That's it.
Ning.
Let's take one last break. Still to come, are we about to discuss the Pro Bowl for the final time?
One can hope.
49th birthday, Bartolo Colon. The former Cy Young winner is currently pitching in the Mexican League after 21 Major League seasons with 11 different teams, 8 in the American League, 3 in the National League, one of which was the Mets. Colon was 44-34 with a 3.90 ERA in 3 seasons with the Mets. Indeed, Colon famously hit his one and only home run as a Met in 2016 at age 42. And I bring all this up because Colon has reportedly told people he'd like to come back to the bigs and pitch for the Mets, who are currently down 3 starters, Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, and Tyler McGill. Colon last pitched in the majors in 2018, but if he were to come back, he would walk in carrying his 247 career wins, which would make him the winningest active pitcher, 15 ahead of Justin Verlander.
I'll be very brief. He's the current day, the new Minnie Minoso, right? I mean, you just keep going.
Yes.
Into his 50s.
Yes.
He won't be wearing any hot pants because he's not playing for a team with bad unis. New Minnie Minoso.
A not-so-happy anniversary, Mike Brown. On this day 12 years ago, Brown was fired as head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, despite the fact that Brown had been NBA Coach of the Year with the same team the year before. That ended the first of 2 stints for Brown with the Cavaliers, this one lasting 5 years, the next one lasting 1 year. In between, Brown coached the Lakers for 1 full season and just 5 games more. Brown has a .616 winning percentage as a head coach, which figures to drop down in his upcoming job as head coach in sorry Sacramento, where there is nobody on the level of LeBron James, whom Brown coached in Cleveland, or Kobe Bryant, whom Brown coached in Los Angeles. Brown has spent the last 6 years as an assistant coach in Golden State.
Tone, I know Mike Brown. I like him tremendously. It is so difficult to do what he's doing. Going from San Francisco to Sacramento in general, from the Warriors to the Kings. Oh my God, this is so difficult. I wish him all the best. I hope some magical player lands in his lap from the draft or somewhere, because he's going to need it.
Happy trails to the Pro Bowl. Sources say the NFL is discussing with the owners in Atlanta now the possibility of eliminating the Pro Bowl game, which has been played since 1938, but maintaining some sort of NFL event during Pro Bowl Sunday. Alternatives reportedly include a 7-on-7 competition without tackling. Everyone knows the current Pro Bowl game is a joke, and a league committed to player safety can hardly endorse a real football game after the season is over. But it gets great ratings, and the NFL wants to hold on to them, so stay tuned.
It's a 7-on-7 non-tackling drill now. What's the difference? They put 4 more guys out there on the side, but that's all it is. I mean, I haven't watched in 30 years. I used to love it when I was a kid, Tone, but I don't know what the league does about this. Doing away with it seems sort of dramatic for the NFL.
One All-Star game worth it, baseball. Everything
else is a
junk.
waste. It is.
Junk. Let's go to the big finish.
Let's
the
do it.
Timberwolves hired away Nuggets president Tim Connolly. Is that significant?
Great for Conley, who's terrific at what he does. 5 years, $40 million, plus an equity kicker. Good for him. Pete Thamel reports that the SEC will consider its own postseason playoff. You taking that seriously?
I'm not, because as good as the SEC is, you're the championship of a conference. You want to be the national champion.
They don't
you want
care.
everybody to know
They
that.
don't care.
That's what you do. The Bulls and Pistons will play a regular season game in Paris. I'll bet you're excited.
No, if I was going to Paris to cover the game, I'd be excited, but I'm not, so I'm not. Canelo Alvarez will fight Triple G for a 3rd time, September 17. You intrigued with that matchup again?
I am. I think these fights have been good before.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see that one.
Me too.
I would. Last one, the Giants have lost 5 straight, so will they beat the Mets tonight?
I'll go to Paris to see that Triple G match with Alvarez. Chris Bassett is 4-2. So while the Mets are down a lot of pitching, they got him on the stump tonight. I'll go with the Mets.
You say on the stump or on the bump?
On the
what
bump.
What did you say?
Bump.
On the stump?
On the bump.
Like he's a politician?
Yeah.
Oh, we're
that
out of
too.
time. We'll try and do better the next time. I'm Tony Kornheimer.
On the rubber, towing the rubber. How about that? I'm
Good.
Mike
That's
Wilbon.
good.
Same time tomorrow, Knuckleheads. You can get the PTR podcast on the ESPN app or Apple Podcasts. And now, Boston. They've stolen that in the Garden from Chicago. And now,
I remember when it was
your
the
sports
slab. When did it become the bump?
Years
When did
ago.
that happen?
Decades.